Well, good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to another Webinar Wednesday hosted by CSU Bakersfield Small Business Development Center. Good afternoon, I'm Kelly Bearden. I am your host today for managing your small business beyond that pesky pandemic. Webinar series number 131. So 131 weeks now of providing this live every Wednesday. Got a great guest host or special guest today. Going to be talking about a lot of things today. So let's get started. So what's up today? Today, September 14th, 2022. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about our economic corner today. Stick over in the economic corner with just a little bit today on how automation might be moving faster than we had anticipated, and a little bit on the inflation news that we just cannot avoid after yesterday. We're going to bring in Celeste in a little while and have our very latest on human resources and hospitality industry in one. It's pretty good. You get HR, you get restaurants, you get hospitality, you get HR that affects restaurants, you get HR that doesn't affect restaurants. And that's what we have in store for you in just a few minutes. We have an update on our remaining programs. There's one new one that's job training related, a little bit towards students, but could work in other areas as well, it appears. We're really getting geared up for our Capital Summit. So our Capital Quarter is going to focus on a few of these particularly interesting angles out there for those that are seeking capital for their small business. One of those is going to be the move to lend, and there's a project out there that is actually moving to increase lending capacity to individuals and small businesses without a credit score. So that's kind of interesting. We're going to keep an eye on that and report back. But a number of major banks are involved. Citibank was the largest. They're the most lately the banks that joined JP Morgan Chase, Wells, US Bank for this project reach. So we'll keep an eye on that to see what's going on in that particular case. We're going to make a case for the startup projection loan. Okay, so many years ago, there were business loans, more of them, and they're coming back. And those are projection based. So what you have is you have financial projections that are actually assisting with the loans. And these are definitely on the uptick. And whereas we're going to just kind of mention this today and move on, we'll be talking about both of these items at our Capital Summit, which will be both in person and virtual. Our marketing moment is momentarily missing, as our marketing maven, Maureen, was dealt a little health scare this morning and is not with us today. So we have Iris Villalobos Howdiggy filling in for her. So Iris, thank you for filling in. And Maureen is resting comfortably. I chatted with her just before the webinar started. And health scare, those are scary. And as always, we'll take your questions and we'll start off potentially with a poll, one that was inspired by Maureen. So let's do this one. So our poll question for the day is, do you collect testimonials from your customers or clients? So testimonials, a great little tool to have around. Maybe you can get those from a survey, maybe an online review, other reasons or sources where you can find testimonials. Maybe you ask a valued customer if they'd be interested in giving one. So we're asking today, very little question on yes or no. Do you collect testimonials from your customers or your clients? So right now we have 55% of you participating in the simple yes and no question. Do you collect testimonials? So we are over the golden moment of 61%. And give you one last chance to jump in. Do you collect testimonials from your customers or clients? As I see, we've retreated below 51%, 61%. So we're going to go ahead and end the poll right now. And we'll share those results with you. And 55% of you say no. So 55% of you know you don't collect testimonials. And we also had 45% of you say yes, of our 57% that participated in today's poll. So I'm sure when Maureen returns next week, she will have a comment on that. But 55% of you are not collecting testimonials, and maybe you're losing that marketing moment. So thank you for participating. Only one poll question today. So, but thank you for participating in the poll today, and we will move along. So a little quick status update on programs. As you see, as they continue to dwindle, we maybe have one to add, but the California Performing Arts Grant is open. First come, first serve. At least to my knowledge, it's open. I believe they have not fully allocated the $49.5 million for that program, but you're going to want to see Lindustry for all the details. Those are, remember, they're kind of employment-related grants for workforce development for nonprofits in the performing arts segment in the state of California. The California Dream Fund program, we see it continuing. And if you're interested and want to have a little bit more information on it, contact SBDC at csub.edu, and we will get back with you with some information on the California Dream Fund. So the California Dream Fund is that particular program where you combine training, you combine consulting and a business plan preparation and meet certain eligibility requirements to obtain either a $5,000 or $10,000 grant to start your own business. So again, for more information, SBDC at csub.edu. You know, EIDL loans are still back in the news as more and more people are hitting that end of the deferral period. You'll recall if you received an EIDL loan in 2020, that it was deferred for 2 years, 2 years plus, maybe 2.5 years. And by actually now we are starting to see the end of those terms. So then it goes to a monthly amortized loan over 30 years. Oftentimes that's at 3.75% over that 30-year period. But you're going to want to check in your portal and also your EIDL loan, if you have one, that it could be becoming due, and set up the necessary requirements in order to keep that baby current. Our state small business credit initiative. Well, more information is coming on that, and hopefully we'll have a lot of information on that at our upcoming Capital Summit. But what that is 5 programs split between 2 government agencies. The 2 agencies are the Treasurer's Office of the state of California, and they will actually do 2 particular programs. They will do a program called CALCAP, which is a bank participation loan program. And they will also have a program that's called a security or collateral lending program. And so how that program is going to work is if you are doing, you're doing, a nice business loan here and you're short on collateral, there might be a way to actually receive some type of funding to boost your collateral, or at least provide a guarantee for the security of that loan. The other 3 programs are out of the iBank of the state of California. And one of them is a loan program through their existing, pretty similar to an SBA guaranteed loan, like the 7A loan program. It's a guaranteed loan through their 7 financial development companies, of which CalCoastal is one in Salinas, and they will be doing guaranteed loans out of that particular program. So the other 2 are going to be equity programs, which are going to involve more investment or actually some type of venture type capital for individuals wanting to do. Stay tuned, we'll have more on that soon. The California Micro Grant Program for Kern County is open. Obviously, we are getting a little shorter on time with the program ending in November, but it is open and money is available. Also, the Mono County Grant and Forgivable Loan Program was open to the last time I inquired. And your employee retention credit, which ended in September 31st of 2021, can actually still be utilized by using a amended payroll form process, doing a 941X and amending that for the 3 quarters that it was open. Contact your accountant or payroll provider. So the program we have open now, which is a little bit new, is the Golden State Education and Training Program. It's a one-time $500 million program. It's also, the main support is to support Californians who lost their jobs due to COVID-19 pandemic. So this is a one-time training grant to reskill, to upskill, or to access educational, which this can go for students, or also into training programs to get individuals back in the workforce. So here's a list of the eligible requirements. You need to be displaced from COVID, meet the award and asset criteria to be eligible for a Cal Grant A award. So a little more information than we're going to get into today, but that information is available. We'll have more information next week on this particular program. Iris, she will be putting in that email address right there. It looks like GSETP, Golden State Educational Training Program, .csac.ca.gov. And that's where you can apply online and find more information about it. Again, this is for students and also for non-students that could be employed or actually participating in, let's say, an American Job Center workforce training program there. Thank you, Jennifer Self, CSUB, for that information on that program. The Economic Corner is going to be abbreviated. You know, yesterday the inflation news was not so good, and it came on the heels of, 14 consecutive weeks of gas prices that have been going down. So gas had been going down for 14 weeks. Inflation hopefully was going to get better news, but that didn't clearly happen yesterday. The markets reacted accordingly. So also what we're starting to hear and we're starting to read and see is that a lot of industries are now hurrying some automation in the wake of some of the problems that they have either attracting or paying for employees these days. So that is something really to keep an eye on as far as some of the industries. I think we all run against it in retail and larger retail, your grocery stores, your warehouse stores that have now moved on to self-checkout. If you're a fan of self-checkout, it's not going away and it's not going to get any smaller. So anyway, employers can reduce the number of jobs that they have, the number of people that they employ, they're going to continue to do so. For our Capital Corner, remember that our Eastern Sierra Capital Summit is just 3 weeks and 2 days away, coming up on October 7th in Bishop. Got some great participants. We've got some really unique programs. If you're looking for capital now, it's a great place to go. If you're looking for capital in the next year or two, it's a great place to go. It is going to be live in person in Bishop from Syracuse College, or it's going to be virtual. So you can join anywhere via Zoom. And a lot of the programs have universal appeal. Some of them will appeal only to rural areas. Some of them, you know, maybe a very select number of the 20, 30, 40, who knows how many programs we discuss that day. There'll be a lot of funding programs on the loan, equity, and investment side of things. So we'll have more information for you next week and how to jump in. I think we covered this well enough in talking about it. Details are finally coming out. It's been about 1.5 years since the legislation's been passed, and hopefully that'll be coming soon. Our marketing moment with our marketing maven Maureen will return next week. And also, if you go look at some of our more popular YouTubes, this one will be on YouTube as well. What you're going to find is you're going to find the topics such as the California Dream Fund. When Celeste was last with us on May 18th, very popular on YouTube, as far as our economic update with Dr. Mark Evans, and also cybersecurity that we're going to take another dive into in a couple of weeks. So there you go. There's a lot of the events that are up and happening. And now it brings me great pleasure to introduce a member of our team, Celeste Young-Ramos. And she's the founder of Restaurant Success Center, a restaurant and human resource consulting firm providing restaurant owners and others in the hospitality industry their managers and skills and support the needs to grow their particular business, maximize profit, and develop and attract highly satisfied employees and customers. So she has several chain operations, hundreds of independent restaurants, and also food service operators from all wakes and sizes. 20 years experience as a human resource manager and franchise directions for Denny's restaurants in Southern California, and 3 decades in food service. It doesn't seem possible. 3 decades, Celeste. She's a graduate of Brigham Young University. Celeste, great to have you back. Take it away.
All right, Kelly, thank you for the kind introduction. You always make me feel so good. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly call. Let me get our slides going for our thing today. And I'm in a community center in a private room, and right next door, they started using the microphone, and it's getting kind of loud. So I hope it doesn't interrupt us today. But we're going to go through updates of the 2022 HR. Some of them will be affecting restaurants, and some of them will be general ones that everyone should be in compliance with. So Kelly already introduced me. I do have a certification in California HR, and I acquired that while supervising, being a multi-level supervisor in restaurants, because I found that the thing that kept me up at night were HR issues and worrying about things like that. So I went and got more educated, and I highly recommend you as small business owners to take some simple classes on labor laws and things like that, so that you can protect all that hard-earned money that you've worked for. So today we're going to go through some 2022 restaurants that apply directly to restaurants. I'll talk about some general industry laws or the whole state of California. Then I'll talk about COVID-19 exposure updates. So what they're telling us to do now if we have an incident occur in our businesses. Then I'll talk about inflation and how it's affecting the food service industry. And if we have some time in the end, then we'll open it up for some questions. So we're going to start off with the most recent piece of legislation. This was actually called the Fast Recovery Act, AB 257. It's Fast Food Recovery Act. It actually went in place last week. Governor Newsom signed it on Labor Day. And this is something that had been being pushed by the group that was trying to get wages up to $15 an hour. And what the law states is that restaurants that are fast food or have counter service, so not a dine-in, not a sit-down dine-in, but if you have to come up to the counter to take your order, or you're coming through a drive-through, and you are a company that has over 100 units nationwide, this will affect your company. Now, I know we have a lot of small independent operators sometimes that get assistance from us in the center, but as things affect the large scale, they have a trickle-down effect to smaller businesses and even other restaurants that don't fall under fast food or counter service. So with this new legislation, the governor is going to appoint a 10-member, what they call a fast food council, and they'll have equal members of employees from fast food restaurants, representatives of fast food restaurants, of the franchisors, also union representation, along with 2 state officials. And they will be meeting on a regular basis, and they're empowered to set minimum wage standards, hour standards, all the working conditions and safety regulations for the entire industry for fast food. And so they're going to be superseding the powers of the Labor Department in those areas. In the legislation, it also said that they could set the minimum wage up to $22 an hour. That's the max. which is well above what the minimum wage currently is. It doesn't quite say what the step up time will be on that, but they did the legislation that they want, or the rules they want to see put into place, that they just have to get 10,000 signatures from people in the industry to agree to it, and then they'll go into effect 6 months after that. So this Recovery Act will be in effect until 2029. So we've got, what, 7 years, or well, 6.5 years that this will be in effect. So, you know, a lot of the research I've done with like the National Restaurant Association, California Restaurant Association, they have been fighting against this. You know, it's always one of these things where you want your people to have a better quality of life, but at the same time, restaurants are struggling right now to keep their doors open. So the timing is not perfect for sure. And we expect that as the wages go up in fast food, you know, people that may be working in other sit down dining or things will transfer over to fast food, or they'll either make the wages in that area go up as well. So we'll see how this goes. I would assume probably by the beginning of the year, we'll start seeing some of their legislative rules coming out. Another law that was actually passed in 2017, but wasn't required to start until July of this year, Responsible Beverage Service Law, AB 1221. So if you are a restaurant or bar or tasting room, hotels and stadiums, you're required at this point to have all of your people go through alcohol beverage training service. So anyone, the employees that serve, even do just card checks, deliverers, the bartenders, cocktail waitresses, all of the people in the restaurant will have to go through this type of training. And it's being very heavily regulated by the state. So you actually have to go, I went through the process myself to get certified. And it was like, you had to go to the state website, register your name, pay a $3 fee. Then you had to go to an approved list of training individuals or companies that provide the training. So be very careful if you send anyone to the training, make sure company that's on the state certified list. Then you have to go take the training, which is like about an hour and a half. Some of them I saw were up to 3 or 4 hours. And then you have to pass a test. And I took really meticulous notes and I only got 85 on it, and you had to have 70. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm concerned. Some employees that aren't really, you know, pay that much attention might not do that well. This is something like the food handler's card, where the employer is not required to pay for it. It costs about $15 for the training at most places. And enforcement for having your licenses available and showing at your restaurant is September 1st. So it just passed at the beginning of the month. So as the ABC starts coming around, they will be expecting to see those training documentations in the businesses. Earlier in the year, we saw single-use utensil laws come out. So now restaurants or any place that is distributing food to go cannot automatically put in silverware. I know a few times I've gone out and I forgot to ask, and you know, then you're in the car and you can't even eat. So we all need to be aware of that. So any kind of plasticware, straws, condiments, little cups for sauces, stir sticks, cocktail straws, all of those things are going to be falling into the category. There is a fine of $25 a day for each day the business isn't in compliance. I was a little surprised it was only a $300 annual maximum. So you know, I've seen some businesses not even comply. You know, our big thing is trying to save the environment. And I know I've got drawers full of plastic silverware and condiments at home that businesses could have actually saved some money on. So that's one that we should expect to see. Earlier through COVID, there was some legislation that allowed off-sale alcohol. So if you had a license for alcohol in a restaurant, you could sell alcohol to go during COVID. And they decided they want to extend those rights to do that for an additional 5 years. So that's good news to restaurants and bars. If you're serving like you can serve sealed manufactured drinks like cans of beer, bottles of beer. If you serve hard liquor or wine or things like that, you do have to have them in a tamper-proof container with a seal over it so they can tell whether it's been opened. And it does have to be sold with food. So some food, an entree has to be sold at the same time. And there's some other rules in regards to who can accept it and checking ID and that kind of thing. But that's good news for those out there who've been enjoying this ability and have another 5 years to continue. We also saw during COVID a lot of outdoor seating granted, and there were 2 outdoor seating laws. One was AB 61, and they're allowing people that got permission before to have outdoor dining to continue that for at least 1 more year. They have like a grace period. They can actually apply permanent status on that. So, so please take care, if you have outdoor dining, you're supposed to get city permits generally. And then SB 314 also helped with alcohol service at music venues, restaurants, and bars, particularly in regards to catering. So before, like, you could have a catering license, you could get one for alcohol for individual events. And they expanded the use of that quite a bit. So before, you could bring alcohol into one location for 24 times in 1 year at one spot. And now they've raised it another 12 incidences at a single location. So they're trying to find ways to bring some money back, into our pockets. Now, here's a HR rule that applies to everyone. This went into effect at the beginning of the year. It's called the Wage Theft Act, AB 1003. And this one really caught my eye because I could probably right now count at least 20 people that I know that have practices in their business that would violate this law. And what it's saying now is if an employer intentionally steals wages from an employee, $950 for one individual employee, or an aggregate total of $2,300 for a group of employees. So 300 from this one, 100 from that one, whatever. It adds up to these amounts and you're prosecuted. It's now considered grand theft. So before it was a misdemeanor and now it's serious. There's a huge fine and possible jail time. So you really need to look at the practices you have in your business. Like, for instance, not paying the correct minimum wage, not paying overtime when you should be paying overtime, not giving people the proper meal breaks or rest periods. And like, you didn't give them to them. The law is if you don't give them their 10-minute break or their 30-minute break, you have to give them 1 hour of pay. So if you're not doing that, that's considered theft. But also I see some employers like, oh, somebody breaks a bunch of dishes or causes some damage to something in the business, and they decide we're taking that out of their wages. You can't do that. So that would be another issue for wage theft. So you really need to be very careful. And a lot of this also will be hinged around tipping. So, making sure that like management and owners are not supposed to take part in the tip pool. So if you're requesting employees split the tips with you, then you could be in violation of this as well. So good opportunity for us to all look to make sure that our employees are getting everything that they're entitled to. DoorDash this year got in quite a bit of trouble. They were using tips that were collected from the customers to supplement the minimum wage, kind of like their own tip credit system like they do in some other states, which is illegal. So there was some legislation passed to protect the delivery drivers or any other people that might be receiving tips. Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So, this was something that, it seemed, I have strong feelings about this one, I have to say. The restaurant industry was one of the industries that got impacted the most. We were here in Los Angeles, where I usually am. We were actually forced to close for a year and a half and limit indoor service. But there were things that everyone was able to take advantage of. Many of the things that Kelly mentioned today, PPP and EIDL, but we were all waiting for the Grand Restaurant Revitalization Fund. And it did come through, but it was designed with a lot of shortfall. There was actually $28 billion that were allotted to help restaurants. The national restaurant industry estimated that there really was a need for about $126 billion. So there was enough funds for about 20% of the population that actually needed it. Well, the funds actually the program stopped last year. There was a lot of controversy over it, but recently the Government Office of Accountability discovered that $180 million still has not been distributed out of that fund. So steps are being put in place to get that back out to the restaurants. I don't know if they're going to revise the program in order to do that, or if it'll be people that just had their applications in and didn't get them filled, where they'll be the first one in the queue. There hasn't been a lot of notification about that. This was just discovered shortly. So that's going to be some good news. Some more people will be able to get it. As you see, 110,000 people who applied got grants. So still, 168,000 that are in the queue. So we'll see how that pans out. Okay, there's also another big legislation that passed in 2018 and was supposed to go in effect in January 2022. And this is something that could have a very heavy impact on our supply chain, whether you're a restaurant or just a regular consumer. We saw a few years ago, there was legislation about chicken eggs, right? Having to be in California, they had to be cage free. I was trying to say out in the field. I don't know, probably not just running around in a field, but they had to be cage free. And we saw prices of eggs jump, and there was a lot of problems at the time because a lot of the distributors were out of state and sorry, I'm getting froggy throat. They had difficulty getting the product in. Well, the law here with the pigs is similar. They're wanting to ensure that pigs have a safe environment. So if they're a breeding pig that's going to be, whelping litter after litter, they're going to need to have more space. So like we see a little pig here in our picture, and he has just like a teeny little footprint. And now they're saying that they have to be enclosed in areas, have 24 square feet, so 6 by 4 foot area. So a lot of these, pig farmers in the West are saying that it's going to cause a lot of costs, and they may even have to require more space. So the prices are definitely going to go up for us in these areas once this legislation passes. There's been some injunctions on it, and right now the Supreme Court has agreed to hear the case. So we're expecting that we may get some word here in about 6 months on whether this will be put into place or not. So this is a rule that's not only going to affect California, but it is going to affect pig farmers throughout the nation as they send a lot of their food out to our area. All right. So COVID-19. So I've been driving around, and most places I look around, it looks like we don't have COVID anymore. I don't see anyone hardly wearing a mask. Once in a while, I'll see a senior citizen with a mask. But most businesses, we've all been lifted of having to wear indoors. If you have a company, you can still make a policy if that's something you want to follow. But for CDC rules, they're saying it's not a requirement. Now, we still are having infection rates. We aren't in the high range anymore. We've moved down into the medium and going a little bit lower. So as people have been getting vaccinated and more the new drug that if you get COVID within the first 5 days, really has a positive effect in limiting your time of sickness. So all of these schools have been working. So now what they're saying is if you have employees that test positive, whether they have symptoms or not, they only have to isolate for 5 days. And during that time, they need to avoid being around people who are likely to get very sick for at least 11 days. So if you isolate and wear a mask, I think they should be pretty good without spreading it. I know I helped with a restaurant opening back in June, into June, and came home with a nice case of COVID. And my husband and my mother were high risk with me wearing a mask and staying in my room and figuring out how they were going to get food to me. They ended up being in the same household and not catching it. So that's good news. They do say, though, if you do have it, they want you to wear a high quality mask, like an N95, not just one of the little blue masks. And you need to wear that at least through day 10. And they're saying that, some companies are saying you can't come back until you test negative. That's totally fine. We are finding that it's taking some people longer than 10 days to not show positivity. So that just may happen. And then screen testing of asymptomatic people without exposure will no longer be recommended in most community settings. So if someone is sick and they're not showing any symptoms on your team, you don't need to go out and have everybody get tested, okay? If someone is showing symptoms of COVID, then I would send them to get tested. And if they come back positive, make sure you isolate them. But this is, much better. And, I work with a lot of restaurants and I've seen it go through I work with a lot of chain restaurants. So I see it go through large groups, whole franchises, that this happens to. So, but we're trying our best, right? All right. There's another new grant out that some of you may be able to take advantage of. Back in 2020, they made some changes to the paid family leave and the Family Leave Act. So just to kind of update you, the paid family leave is if you have a company of 5 people or more, you're required to give 8 weeks of child bonding or family care to your employees. Now, there are requirements for the family paid leave and the Family Leave Act. They have to have like 1,200 hours they've worked with you. There's a few rules, so not everyone will be eligible. Particularly your part-timers probably may not be eligible, be more your full-time employees. So they can take up to 8 weeks for child bonding and family care. And this is paid, but it's not paid by you, it's paid by the EDD. So you can take a breath there, because I know every time we see the word paid, we're like freaking out. But it'll be paid by the EDD. While they're out, they can also have 12 weeks of non-paid protective leave. So that means you don't pay them during that time, but you have to save their job for 12 weeks. You can't, if they're working a certain shift, you can't change your shift. You can't demote them. You can't hire someone to permanently take over. You have to have someone temporarily fill that position. And it used to be that if you had if you were the top person, like when I was an area manager for a franchise, the top 10% weren't eligible for this. And I was always a little upset about that. But now they've made it that everyone in the organization will be eligible for this. Now, we know when people are out on leave that it causes a burden to the restaurant or any business, particularly if you're small and you don't have a lot of extra staff that could easily slide into that spot, with an agreement that it's going to be a temporary situation. So the government is trying to help subsidize that. So they have a couple categories here, a small business and a larger business eligibility. So if you have 1 to 100 employees and you have at least one person who is out on California paid family leave on or after June 1st, 2022, you can receive $2,000 per employee to offset the costs that you may have in hiring new people or training people to fill that position. So this is like a really great benefit to help us out. If you are a larger employer, they're going to give a $1,000 grant. So all of these are going to be grants that you don't have to repay. And it really definitely will help to offset some of those costs. Now, at this point, the information that I've reviewed, it doesn't really say how you have to document it, or do you have to prove you spent $2,000? It sounds like they're just giving you the flat $2,000. And I'll put in the chat for you the link for this grant. So this should make some of you feel a little more comfortable when you run into those types of situations. All right. So to be eligible, your business must be registered to do business in the state. So if you are incorporated, you'll have to show that you have active status with the Secretary of State. If you're a sole proprietor business, you can also apply. You'll just have to show that you have a business license for the city that you do business. If your city doesn't have business licenses, and there's a few that don't, you may have to show a fictitious business statement or something to show that you are actively as a business. And you also have to have a California employer account. So this is the payroll number that's associated with your business. And the people that you ask for the $2,000 grant or the $1,000 grant, they have to be shown that they are on your payroll and were on your payroll previous to June, the June date that I just mentioned, June 1st, 2022. And they were, because they can't even get it if they haven't been, they have to, for them to get it anyway, they're going to have to meet the requirement of having 1,250 hours. So they've had to be on your payroll at least a year, probably, for most people to be eligible. Now, if you're hiring people through what we call a PEO, a professional employer organization, like you're getting them through a temporary agency, you won't be eligible for these credits. The temporary agency will be able to apply there for that. Okay. So those are all the big HR updates and restaurant law updates for 2022. So I think I'm going to go through this next little piece and then we'll come back to take questions. So that way I make sure I get everything covered. I do see there might be one question in the chat, or maybe there's a comment. Well, I'll take the question that I have in the chat. Actually, it's pretty quick. Do we have to have timesheets showing rest breaks and such for wage theft, and how to document such things? Well, you are required as an employer to have timesheets for your non-exempt employees. So those are the employees that work off of an hourly wage. So you can have a time card where they write the numbers in themselves. It could be punched, like a paper one where they punch it into a machine, or as we see nowadays, automated systems. You have to record the 30-minute breaks. The 10-minute breaks, we don't recommend that you record those. I was recently with a whole team of the lawyers talking about the PAGA lawsuits. And they were saying that, you know, some employers are going and like they're being overly vigilant, having people clock in and out for the 10-minute break, which they're not required to do. But then there'll be other employees that don't follow the rule and don't clock in and out. And so by them not clocking in and out, it draws suspicion onto your regular policy. Like, well, did they not get the 10-minute break? Because they didn't clock in and out. So they were recommending not following clocking in and out for 10 minutes, but you're definitely required to do it for the 30-minute breaks. If you have salaried managers that you're having them as exempt salaried managers, meaning I'm paying them a high enough wage, which right now in California, the minimum for an employer of 28 and below, 26 and below is $58,040, I believe. It's 58,000 some odd dollars. And then if you're a larger employee of 26, you need to be paying them a minimum of $62,000. They also they have to be doing more than 51% of their day spent doing managerial tasks. Often that's hard to reach that in restaurants if they're just like an assistant manager or a supervisor, because we often have them doing job duties and helping fill in and taking seat and greet and cash out people and things. And they have to be supervising at least 2 people. So in that case, you don't have to record the breaks if you can meet those requirements. But all time has to be done by the exact time it happens. Like I worked with one company, they got in a lot of trouble because they said, okay, you work 8 to 4. So put on your time card 8 to 4, even if you clocked in at, 7:56 or, they got done at 4:20. They always rounded to the time the schedule said, and the employees just wrote that in every shift, and it was like the lawyer said, well, that's just like garbage paper. You don't do that practice. And I know at one restaurant, they paid out $300,000 for that. So you got to be very careful there. All right. So I'm going to talk about inflation, consumer hunger here in the restaurant industry. I'm not sure how many of you are on the call here today are with restaurants. So if you are with restaurants, put it in the chat. I'd love to see the name of your company, etc. So there was a poll done of Alignable. Alignable is like a networking thing, kind of like a LinkedIn, but not quite to that level at this point. But they were interviewing and doing surveys of their small business owners. Nearly half of their small business owners felt that inflation could drive them out of business this year. And 3/4 of restaurant owners in that organization felt that inflation could still drive them out. And I do see that very heavily. In California, we lost 33,000 restaurants during COVID-19. And we were all like, oh, 33,000, it's a tremendous number. And my heart goes out to every restaurant that lost their restaurants, because I know how much blood, sweat, and tears goes into being a restaurateur. But it's not over. And I get lots of reports about minimum wages, we went up anyway here in California, for $14 and $15 statewide. Out in the LA market, they're already up to $604 because they have a cost of living increase. So in that market, for instance, the minimum wage was $15, but because they had a cost of living increase factor in it, it jumped at a whole $1.04 this year. So that's really concerning. So as we see wages go up for the minimum, of course, it always causes what we call compression. So people like, your cooks want to get more wages. I always seem to see what I noticed over decades working in, multi-unit supervision. It's like when the minimum wage went up, the cooks wanted a raise too, and they wanted it had to be at least $2.50 to $3 more than what the servers were making at the time. So if it was 15, they wanted to make at least 18. And of course, there were some restaurants like fine dining. I was with Denny's, so we were at the lower end of pricing, right? So our wages had to reflect that as well. So, where it was $3 there, now I'm seeing fast food around that they're paying like $16.50 minimum. That's what I'm seeing at Del Taco. I'm seeing posted at Panda Express that they're starting them at $17.50 for just the counter people, and then the cooks are like making $20 to $22 an hour. Now, all of your markets, here in the Central Coast, it might be a little bit less. It's all supply and demand too, and that's hurting us because we've had the great resignation. A lot of people that were seniors or getting into that, more toward their end of their careers, decided to take early retirements. And a lot of people, while they were laid off in the restaurant industry, sat around and said, do I really enjoy what I'm doing? Could I be getting more? And other industries were able to gobble up some of our employees because they also had a lack. And so, we're seeing a big problem in our industry. And I was seeing that, quite frankly, in some job codes like cooks well before COVID hit. So, so that's going to be the big challenge for us. And we'll have to see how this pans out with this fast food law, if that's going to also affect us. And recently, we also had Starbucks becoming unionized in several locations. Anytime those things happen to the big guns, it just shoots like a trimmer through the rest of the industry. And, that's the last thing that we'd like to see. I mean, usually they'll go after larger businesses first because they feel there's more money there, but, it can spread. So we saw, the consumer price index for the year was at 8.6%. Of that, 11% of the several cost areas that really showed the biggest increase were food. Food was 11 to 12% up over last year. So we're not only seeing that in grocery, but we're seeing that in restaurants as well. And energy was the hugest area. It was up 20% of the over last year for the consumer price index. So these costs went up, and these are two things that affect all of us, drastically, plus your restaurant businesses particularly. And during this time, though, disposable income it kind of stayed flat, 0.1%. That's nothing, right? So, even as we've had to pay our employees more to get them to work, they're not getting any benefit from it because they're having to pay more in these two big expenses. So the fast food industry was hit the hardest. They had a sales decline this year of 13%. Of course, they had a bumper year last year. They really it was to their advantage last year with all of the indoor dining restrictions. Restaurants are currently up 2.4% over last year. What I'm seeing is like the people that were already running great restaurants before COVID, they struggled, but people still went to them and they adapted and they brought in, online ordering, and they really executed well curbside, or, worked and made relationships with the fast third-party deliveries. And they still maintain a lot of their business. And some of my clients actually did better during COVID than they did prior to COVID, with just changes they made in their business. But it's the small people that were struggling already. Like the profit for a restaurant that is doing average across the United States is only 3 to 6% on each dollar. So 3 to 6 cents on a dollar is the profit level. Now, there's some that are run better that have really great established training systems. They might run up to 6 to 8. And then we have kind of the legacy ones that, I think of the Chick-fil-A's and the In-N-Out burgers and, some of the ones that, you see cars lining down the street going into, their profit levels are going to be probably 8 to 10%. So there's not a lot of leeway when prices go up for us. The one thing with these sales going up in the restaurant industry is traffic is going down. And that's really not what you want to see. The sales are going up because we're raising prices. We don't want to lose the traffic. And that's always what's going to happen during inflationary periods. So we saw that happen in the big crash with the housing industry 2007 and 08. So what we can do as strategies is we can re-engineer our menu. And if you have not ever taken the time to actually go through and cost out your menu, I would recommend that. And I'll put in the chat a free website that you could go to where you can put in your inventory master of all the items you purchase and then put in your recipe and you'll know exactly how much each item costs you. And then you want to go and put in the menu items that you make the most profit with, and put those and advertise those and get people to move toward those. You may even have to take some things off the menu temporarily because of supply and demand issues. You may have to reduce your size on some plates, but have it at a price that people can afford to have. They still want to go out. Millennials still are going to go out and eat third party. That's their way of life. They expect that. And we expect to see third party continuing because it's taken off. They really haven't seen that much of a slowdown. But we also need to use technology to help bring down the labor cost. Because in the restaurant business, our top 3 costs, 2 of them are called the prime cost, food cost and labor. Those should be no more than 65% of your total monthly revenue. And your occupancy or lease shouldn't be more than 10%. So between those 3 items, it's taking up 75% of all the money coming in that you sell. So you really need to put your efforts toward, looking at your food, particularly theft, making sure people are charging everything right now, because as our employees, I hate to say it, as things get tight for them, there's about, 10-20% that might take advantage of a situation they see in your business, whether you're a restaurant or not. Denny's one year lost $4 million in coffee packets, for brewing our coffee, so things like that can really add up. So there's so many technologies that we saw through COVID, QR codes, love them. Online ordering that gets integrated into your ordering system. I used to spend so much money at Denny's paying hostesses to take to-go orders and having them be able to do that on the website and not even have to deal with it, or being able to send customers to the website to see what's on our menu instead of answering, well, what's on your menu and what are the prices? It's a credible time saver. And then we just need to do things that are going to help retain our employees, because right now they have a lot of opportunity to be stolen away from us, and we need to get engaged with them. So focus on your customer, do the best that you can with the food quality and taste. That's what's going to bring people in because they can't replicate it. And also they're saying convenience needs to be the big focus. That's one reason why third party hasn't ended, is because of the convenience. Okay, guys, boy, did I talk so fast for 45 minutes. So as I said, I'm Celeste. I'm with the Restaurant Success Center. I am a restaurant and HR consultant here for the center. And I do private support as well. So my contact information is here. I'd love to have you set up an appointment with us here at the center to help grow your business and to look at these different solutions that we can have in human resources and restaurant operations. So thank you for letting me share today. You're still on mute, Kelly.
Fantastic stuff. Great
Thank you.
information. And really do take advantage. You have an opportunity to meet with Celeste through the CSU Bakersfield SBDC. You can contact us or contact Celeste and maybe get in the weeds in some of these costs and other issues that can only help in these troubling times.
Yeah.
Well, last chance for a question. So I don't see any. So we're going to wrap it up. Celeste, thank you so much for being here today. Great as always. I am attentive as can be.
My pleasure.
Getting all my updates, COVID, restaurants, everything. Talking to a lot of restaurant people myself. So good to know. We'll be back next week. We'll be back with number 132. Our guest will be Lonnie Lott. And Lonnie will be talking about ways to pull in a great financial fourth quarter. So some tips for the fourth quarter. And that'll wrap it for today. So for Celeste, I am Kelly Bearden. We'll be back next week. Everybody have a good week. Bye-bye, everybody.